Ryan had been walking for 2 days through the mountain trails. His shoes were torn, and his small backpack carried only a few biscuits, a half-empty water bottle, and an old map. He had lost his job 3 months ago, and his savings had vanished faster than he expected. The world felt heavy, but the open trail was still his only place of peace. The sun was setting when he reached the top of a hill. There, hidden between tall pine trees, stood an old wooden lodge. Its roof was covered with dry leaves, and vines crawled over its walls. A rusty sign hung by the door that read Hill Rest Lodge. Ryan stopped and stared. He had passed this area before, but he never noticed any building here. He walked closer. The wooden steps creaked under his feet. He tried the front door. It was unlocked. The air inside smelled of dust and thyme. Cobwebs hung from the corners, and the furniture was covered with white sheets. Ryan dropped his bag and sat on a chair. It was the first roof over his head in days. He looked around, trying to imagine who might have lived here. The place was large, with many rooms, a fireplace, and a staircase leading upstairs. A few pictures still hung on the walls. One of them showed a smiling old man standing in front of the same lodge, holding a walking stick. Ryan found a candle on the table and lit it with his lighter. Warm light filled the room. The wind outside whistled through broken windows. He explored a bit more, moving slowly through each room. There was an old kitchen, a sitting area, and a dusty hallway with a clock that had stopped long ago. When night came, he made a small fire in the fireplace. He sat beside it, eating the last of his biscuits. For the first time in weeks, he felt safe. He thought about his life, and no home, no money, no one to call. He had been wandering for too long, hoping something would change. The next morning, Ryan woke up early. Sunlight came through the cracks in the wooden walls. He stepped outside to wash his face with cold stream water nearby. When he came back, he noticed something strange. On the table where he had left his bag, there was an envelope. It was old and yellow, but clearly had not been there before. Ryan looked around, thinking maybe someone had entered during the night. But the place was quiet. He opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter written in faded ink. To the rightful heir of Hill Rest Lodge, if you are reading this, it means destiny has brought you here. This lodge belongs to you, passed down from those who walked before. Keep it, restore it, and protect its secret. At the bottom of the letter was a name, Eldon Marlowe. Ryan had never heard of him. He turned the letter over, and on the back was something else written in smaller handwriting. Look beneath the floor where the light meets the shadow. Ryan stood frozen. Was this some kind of joke? How could a man with nothing suddenly become the heir of a lodge? He walked around looking for any clue. The floor creaked with each step. The sun entered from a broken window, casting a beam of light across the wooden floor. Where the light met the shadow near the fireplace, one wooden plank looked slightly different from the others. He knelt and pressed it. It moved a little. Using a small knife from his bag, he lifted the plank. Underneath was a dark square hole. Inside lay an old metal box covered with dust and spider webs. His heart beat fast. He pulled it out and wiped it clean. The box was locked, but the lock looked weak. He hit it with a small stone until it broke. Inside were several papers and an old brass key. The papers were deeds and property records, all with the name Ryan Marlowe. His full name. He dropped the papers, shocked. How could this be? He remembered his late mother once mentioned that her father had owned land in the mountains before he disappeared. Could this lodge have belonged to him? Ryan spent the rest of the day cleaning the main room. He found an old broom and cleared dust from the corners. The fireplace looked strong. The furniture, though covered in dirt, was well made. It felt like a forgotten treasure. That evening he made soup with wild herbs he found outside. As he ate by the fire, his eyes went to the box again. The brass key inside it had strange markings, a star, a circle, and 3 lines. He wondered what it might open. He searched the house, trying every door and drawer. Nothing matched the key. He checked the upstairs rooms. The floorboards creaked louder there, and the walls were marked with age. In the farthest corner, behind a tall wardrobe, he noticed something odd. The wall behind it looked newer than the rest. He pushed the wardrobe aside. It was heavy, but he managed to move it enough to see a small locked door hidden behind it. The door was barely taller than his waist and made of metal instead of wood. Ryan held up the brass key. It looked like it might fit. His hand shook as he placed it in the lock and turned it. A faint click sounded. The door opened slowly, revealing a narrow staircase going downward into darkness. Cold air rushed out from below. He lit another candle and took a deep breath. Step by step he went down. The stairs led to a small underground room. The walls were made of stone, and the air smelled old. In the center of the room stood a wooden table covered with a cloth. Ryan pulled the cloth away. Under it were several small chests, all locked, and a large trunk with a heavy chain around it. On the wall behind the trunk hung a painting of the same old man from the picture upstairs, Eldon Marlowe. Ryan stepped closer and read a small note nailed under the painting. "The treasure is not gold, but the key to a legacy." He touched the trunk's cold metal surface. The brass key had worked once, but there were still more locks here. He wondered if more keys were hidden around the lodge. He sat down, thinking about everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. He came here as a broke hiker, hungry and lost. And now he stood inside a secret room beneath a forgotten lodge that somehow belonged to him. That night, he slept in one of the upstairs rooms. The wind howled outside, but he felt something new, hope. For the first time in a long while, he had a reason to stay in one place. As he closed his eyes, he promised himself he would find out what this place truly held. He would fix the lodge, open every locked chest, and discover what Eldon Marlowe meant by legacy. But in the darkness below, deep inside the hidden room, something clicked softly, as if one of the locks had just opened on its own. Morning sunlight entered through the cracked window and fell across Ryan's face. He opened his eyes slowly, feeling the stiffness in his arms and legs. For a moment he forgot where he was, then he remembered the events of the night before. The hidden door, the underground room, and the locked chests waiting below. He sat up and looked around. The room smelled of old wood, but it felt more like home now. He washed his face in cold water and went downstairs. The fire from last night had turned to ash. He stirred it, added some dry wood, and lit it again. The warmth made him feel alive. After a quick meal of boiled herbs and bread, Ryan decided to return to the underground room. He picked up the brass key from the table and took a candle in one hand. The narrow staircase looked darker than before. As he stepped down, the cold air touched his face. The trunks and chests were still where he had left them. Nothing had moved, but Ryan felt uneasy. He remembered the faint sound of a click before he fell asleep. He went closer and noticed one of the small chests was slightly open. He knelt and slowly lifted the lid. Inside were several rolled documents tied with ribbon. He opened one carefully. It was a map of the surrounding mountains drawn with fine ink lines. Small red marks were placed in different spots. Under each mark was a symbol that looked like a key or star. Another paper inside the chest was a letter, written in the same hand as the one he found upstairs. The land holds more than soil and trees. Hidden paths lead to what many seek but few can understand. Trust your name and follow the signs. Ryan read the letter twice. He could not make sense of it, but it filled him with curiosity. He searched through the other chests, but they were still locked. The large trunk with the chain was too heavy to move. He tried to open its locks with the brass key, but it did not fit. He sighed and sat on the cold floor, looking around the small stone room. On one side, he noticed a metal lantern hanging from a hook. He lifted it and saw a pattern engraved on the wall behind it, the same star and circle that were on the key. When he touched the wall, a small stone piece moved inward. He pressed harder, and a hidden panel opened slightly. Inside it was a second key, silver in color, wrapped in a small cloth. Ryan held it up to the candlelight. It was thin and delicate, with carvings along the handle. He smiled a little and walked to one of the locked chests. The silver key fit perfectly. Inside were several small bags of coins shining even under the weak candlelight. Gold and silver coins filled the box. Ryan stared at them, his heart beating fast. He had not seen real gold in his life. He counted some of them, then stopped. It did not matter how many there were. It was more money than he could ever dream of. But at the bottom of the chest, beneath the coins, he found another folded paper. He opened it carefully. Wealth is not the only gift. The true prize is hidden deeper. Use the silver key to open the gate within the fire. Ryan frowned. The gate within the fire, what did that mean? He thought about the fireplace upstairs. Maybe the clue was there. He closed the chest and carried the paper and key with him. As he climbed back up the stairs, he felt a new kind of energy. The lodge was no longer just a shelter. It was part of something bigger, something mysterious that called him to uncover it. When he reached the main hall, he looked at the large fireplace. The fire was burning low. He pushed aside the ashes and noticed a small iron plate at the back of the fireplace. It looked like part of the wall, but one edge had a keyhole. Ryan's pulse quickened. He took the silver key and inserted it. The key turned smoothly. A soft click sounded, and part of the back wall of the fireplace slid open, revealing a small iron door. Behind that door was a narrow passage leading into darkness. He grabbed his candle and crawled through. The air smelled of old stone and ash. The tunnel turned left and opened into another hidden chamber. This room was different from the one below the lodge. It was cleaner, with shelves full of books, jars, and old tools. On a wooden table sat a strange metal box with wires and gears. Beside it was a thick journal. Ryan wiped the dust from the journal and opened it. The first page read, "The Experiments of Eldon Marlowe, property of Hillrest Lodge." His eyes widened. So the old man in the picture had worked here, not as an ordinary lodge owner, but as some kind of inventor. He flipped through the pages. The journal spoke of secret work, machines that could find minerals underground, energy crystals, and methods of storing power. The drawings showed strange devices, one shaped like a compass but with several moving parts. It seemed Eldon Marlowe had been studying ways to locate hidden resources under land and stone. Ryan's hands trembled as he read. The old man had written about finding a core chamber deep under the hill that could change a person's life forever. He looked around the room again and saw something, covered under a large sheet near the corner. When he lifted it, he found a big circular machine, rusted but still standing. The machine had a seat and a panel full of levers. A brass plate on the side read, "Earth Resonance Detector." He touched the metal. It was cold, but it felt solid. He had no idea how it worked. But if the journal was right, this machine could find hidden minerals or treasures buried deep below. He spent the next few hours exploring the rest of the chamber. There were crates filled with tools, gears, and small crystal-like stones that glowed faintly when touched. He also found another small chest locked with a different kind of latch, shaped like the symbol of the star and circle. Ryan tried both keys he had, but neither worked. He decided not to force it open. He placed it aside and carried the journal back upstairs. The sun was already setting when he reached the main hall. The light coming through the window made the dust sparkle in the air. Ryan sat by the fire reading more of the journal. The last few pages mentioned a final test that Eldon Marlowe never completed because he feared it would attract attention from powerful people. Ryan read the last note carefully. "If the world ever finds this lodge, they will come for what lies beneath. Only the heir of my bloodline will understand its value. Protect it and use it wisely." He closed the book and leaned back. The words made him think deeply. His family had never spoken about this man or this place. Maybe they wanted to protect him from this secret. Now, with gold coins beside him and the strange machine hidden under the hill, Ryan realized his life was no longer ordinary. But he was still unsure whether this inheritance was a blessing or a burden. Outside, the wind grew stronger. The trees swayed and the sound of branches hitting the walls echoed through the lodge. Ryan stood near the window and looked at the forest. Between the trees, he thought he saw a dim light moving, as if someone was walking toward the lodge carrying a lantern. He froze and stepped back. He waited, watching the light disappear behind the trees. Maybe it was only his imagination, or maybe someone else already knew about Hillrest Lodge. Ryan closed the door and added more wood to the fire. He took the silver key, the brass key, and the journal, then placed them safely under his pillow. He sat on the bed staring at the ceiling, his mind full of questions. Somewhere beneath his feet, the secrets of his family waited. And now he was not sure if he was the only one searching for them. The night outside Hillrest Lodge was quiet at first. Then came the sound of wind pushing through the trees and branches scratching the roof. Ryan sat near the fire trying to calm his thoughts. He could not stop thinking about the moving light he had seen in the forest. Maybe it was just the wind or a reflection, but something inside told him it was not. He picked up the journal again, hoping to distract himself. The words of Eldon Marlowe filled his mind. The machine beneath the lodge, the secret rooms, the warnings about those who might come for it. All of it made Ryan feel uneasy. He stood up and walked to the window. The moonlight made the forest glow faintly. The moving light he had seen before was gone. But now he noticed footprints near the path leading to the lodge. They looked fresh, pressed into the mud after the evening rain. Ryan's heart raced. He took a deep breath and decided to check. He picked up a small lantern from the shelf and went outside. The air was cold, and the night was silent except for the sound of leaves under his boots. He followed the footprints for a few meters until they disappeared into the trees. Then he heard it, a snapping branch close by. He turned quickly, holding the lantern high. A figure stood behind a tree, barely visible in the shadows. "Who's there?" Ryan called out. No answer came, only the sound of slow footsteps. The figure stepped out from behind the tree. It was a man, wrapped in an old coat and carrying a backpack. His face was covered with dirt and his beard was untrimmed. He looked like another traveler. "Don't worry," the man said in a tired voice. "I'm not here to harm you. I saw the firelight from down the hill. I've been walking for days." Ryan lowered the lantern slightly. "This place is old and not safe to stay in." "What are you doing here?" The man smiled faintly. "Name's Thomas. Used to work in these parts years ago. I thought this lodge was empty." Ryan studied him carefully. His clothes were worn, but his eyes looked sharp. Not lost like a traveler should be. Ryan nodded slowly. "I'm just staying for a while," he said. "You can rest inside if you want. There's some food left." Tomas followed him inside. He sat near the fire, warming his hands. His eyes moved across the room, pausing at the table, the fireplace, and the stairs. "You've done some cleaning," Tomas said. "Most people wouldn't bother fixing this old place." "I like quiet places," Ryan replied. "They help me think," Thomas smiled. "You look like someone who's found something worth thinking about." Ryan stayed silent. He did not want to mention the keys, the gold, or the hidden rooms. But he could feel that Tomas was not just a wanderer. After eating, Tomas stretched his legs. "I used to come here as a boy," he said. "The old man who owned this place was strange, always working on something under the ground. People said he found a way to pull gold from the hills." Ryan's chest tightened. He looked at Thomas carefully. "Do you remember his name?" "Yes," Thomas said. "Eldon Marlowe. They say he disappeared one night. Some thought he went mad. Others believed he hid his fortune somewhere in these mountains." Ryan forced a small smile. "Stories like that travel far," Thomas nodded. "Maybe, but stories like that often have a bit of truth in them." The fire crackled. Silence filled the room again. Ryan noticed Thomas's eyes drifting toward the fireplace where the hidden passage was. Later that night, after Thomas went to sleep in one of the side rooms, Ryan sat awake. His thoughts raced. How did Tomas know so much? Was it just coincidence, or had he come for the same thing Ryan had just found? He decided to keep everything hidden for now. He quietly checked the journal and both keys, making sure they were still under his pillow. Then he lay down but could not sleep. In the middle of the night, a sound woke him. It was faint but clear, the creak of the floor near the stairs. Ryan opened his eyes and listened. Footsteps moved slowly toward the fireplace. He got up and tiptoed to the door. Peeking through the crack, he saw Tomas crouched near the fireplace, shining a small flashlight. His hand touched the edge of the iron door behind the fire. Ryan stepped into the hall. "What are you doing?" he asked firmly. Thomas jumped up. "You startled me," he said. "I thought I heard something down here." Ryan crossed his arms. "This part of the lodge is dangerous. You should stay away from it." Thomas looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. I just got curious." Ryan said nothing more and went back to his room, but he did not go back to sleep. He sat by the window watching until morning. When the sun rose, Thomas was already packing his things. "Thank you for the food and the fire," he said. "I'll be on my way now." Ryan nodded. "Safe travels." As Thomas walked away, Ryan noticed he kept glancing back at the lodge. Something about his behavior bothered him. Once Thomas disappeared into the woods, Ryan quickly checked the hidden rooms. Everything seemed untouched, but the journal was slightly out of place. He sighed and decided it was time to move faster. If someone like Thomas knew about the lodge, others might too. He had to understand the full mystery before anyone else reached it. He spent the day studying Eldon Marlowe's journal again. He found a new page he had missed before, one drawn in faded ink with a small symbol of a mountain and a mark beneath it. Under the mark were the words, "The source lies under the hill behind the spring. Only the compass will guide the way." Ryan looked around the room. There had been drawings of a compass-like machine in the hidden chamber. He rushed downstairs and found it under the sheet where he had left it. The machine had a round dial and a small glass piece in the center. He turned the lever and the glass began to glow faintly blue. A needle inside started to move, pointing toward the back of the lodge. Ryan followed it through the rear door and down the slope. He walked until he reached the small spring that ran between the trees. The needle began to spin faster, then stopped, pointing at a flat rock near the water. Ryan knelt and brushed away the dirt. Underneath, he found another metal plate like the one in the fireplace, but this one had no keyhole. He pressed it and it made a dull sound. He tapped it again, harder. The ground below gave a hollow echo. He realized there was space beneath it. He looked around for tools and found an old shovel in the shed behind the lodge. He dug around the plate until it came loose. Beneath it was a dark opening leading into another underground tunnel. Ryan's heart pounded as he looked down. The air was cold, and faint light reflected from something inside. He climbed carefully into the tunnel. The walls were covered in stone and the floor sloped downward. After a few steps, the tunnel opened into a large underground chamber. In the center stood a round platform with strange metal pillars around it. The faint light came from crystal stones fixed in the walls. On one side of the chamber was another chest, larger than any he had seen before. Ryan approached it slowly. It was locked with a symbol he had not seen before. A star surrounded by a circle, but this time, the star had 6 points. He placed both his keys near it, but they did not fit. He stood there, breathing hard, feeling both excitement and fear. Somewhere behind him, he thought he heard the faint echo of footsteps again, soft but clear. Ryan turned quickly, holding the lantern high. The tunnel behind him was empty, but the sound did not stop. It grew closer, one step at a time. He swallowed hard, gripping the lantern tighter. Maybe Tomas had not gone as far as he said, or maybe someone else had finally found Hillrest Lodge. Ryan stood frozen in the underground tunnel. The faint sound of footsteps echoed behind him, slow and steady. He raised his lantern, its soft light flickering against the stone walls. The air was cold and every small noise sounded louder in the silence. "Who's there?" Ryan called, his voice trembling slightly. No answer came. The footsteps stopped. He waited for a few seconds, then took a deep breath and turned toward the large chest again. It stood in the middle of the chamber, locked with a strange 6-pointed star. The glow from the crystal stones made the metal surface shine faintly. Ryan wanted to open it, but neither of his keys worked. He placed his hand on the chest, feeling the cool surface. He whispered quietly, "What are you hiding?" Then he noticed something near the base of the chest. It was a small engraving, half covered by dust. He brushed it clean with his fingers and saw a series of symbols, the same ones that appeared in Eldon Marlowe's journal. Next to them were faint words. "The key is not metal but light." Ryan frowned. "Light?" He lifted his lantern and aimed it at the chest. Nothing happened. Then he remembered the glowing crystals fixed in the wall. They gave off a dim blue shine, just like the glass on the compass machine in the lodge. Maybe there was a connection. He climbed back up to the surface, trying not to make noise. The sky outside had turned gray and light rain was falling. The forest looked calm again, but Ryan's thoughts were not. He still could not forget the sound of those footsteps. Inside the lodge, he went to the secret room where the strange machine stood. He checked the dials in the glowing glass. The blue light still pulsed faintly. On the side of the machine, he noticed a small switch that he had not seen before. It was marked with the same 6-pointed star. Ryan hesitated, then flipped the switch. The machine made a low hum, and the glass began to glow brighter. The needle inside spun fast, then stopped completely, pointing straight toward the back of the hill again. At that moment, the blue light grew stronger, filling the room with a soft shine. He realized this must be the light key mentioned in the message. He carefully lifted the glowing glass sphere from the machine. It came loose easily, as if it was meant to be removed. Holding it, he felt a gentle vibration, like energy running through his hand. Ryan carried it back to the underground chamber. The glow from the sphere grew brighter as he approached the large chest. When he held it over the lock, the carvings on the metal began to shimmer. The 6-pointed star turned slowly and the sound of gears moved inside the chest. Then with a soft click, the lock opened. Ryan took a deep breath and lifted the lid. Inside were several layers of papers, old devices, and a small wooden box. The papers looked like blueprints filled with numbers, circles, and diagrams. Some of them were marked Prototype Energy Source. Others mentioned Marlowe Foundation Patent. He picked up the wooden box and opened it. Inside was a small crystal, glowing faintly like the light in his hand. It was warm to touch. He placed it next to the glass sphere, and the two lights reacted, merging into one stronger glow that filled the chamber with white light. Rian shielded his eyes. When the light faded, he noticed something new. The back wall of the chamber had changed. A part of it had moved, revealing another passage. He stepped closer and saw a narrow tunnel leading deeper underground. Curiosity pushed him forward. The tunnel curved for several meters before opening into a wide circular hall. The floor was covered with stone tiles, and in the center stood a large metal column surrounded by wires and crystals. On the wall near it was a plaque with engraved words, "Here lies the heart of Hillrest. Power for those who protect, not destroy." Rian slowly walked around the column. It looked like a generator, but unlike any he had ever seen. The crystals inside it pulsed with light, giving off a soft hum. It seemed alive, as if it was breathing. He looked at the surrounding walls and found shelves filled with notebooks and records. He opened one and began to read. Eldon Marlowe had written about discovering a natural energy under the mountain, a mineral that could produce endless clean power when combined with the crystals he created. He had built the generator to harness it, but before he could finish his work, people from the city came looking for him. They wanted to buy the land, not knowing what was hidden below. Eldon had locked everything away to keep it safe for someone he trusted, his future heir. Rian's hands trembled. He realized the truth. His grandfather had not disappeared. He had hidden this creation from greedy hands, and now it was Ryan's responsibility. He turned back toward the tunnel, but before he could leave, he heard footsteps again. This time they were clear and close. He hid behind the column and waited. A dim light appeared from the tunnel entrance. It was Thomas. He stepped into the hall holding a flashlight and a small metal tool. His eyes widened as he saw the glowing crystals. So the stories were true, he whispered to himself. The old man did find it. Ryan stepped out from behind the column. "You followed me," he said firmly. Thomas turned quickly, surprised. "I tried to warn you," he said, pretending to sound calm. "This place isn't safe. There are people who know about it." Ryan crossed his arms. "You're one of them, aren't you?" Thomas sighed. "Listen, boy. I worked for Eldon Marlowe once. He promised to share this discovery, but then he vanished. I've been looking for this for years. It doesn't belong to you." "It does," Ryan replied. "I'm his family, and he wanted this protected." Thomas stepped closer. "You don't understand what you have. That energy could make you rich beyond belief, or destroy you if others find out. You can't keep it hidden forever." Ryan looked at the glowing column behind him. The crystals hummed gently, as if alive. "Maybe I don't need to sell it. Maybe it's meant to help people." Thomas shook his head. "Help people? The world doesn't work that way. Sooner or later, someone stronger will take it. You should at least profit from it before they do." Ryan stayed silent. The glow from the crystals reflected on their faces. The two men stood on opposite sides of the room, both knowing the other would not back down easily. Then a sudden tremor shook the ground. Dust fell from the ceiling. Thomas stumbled. "What did you do?" he shouted. Ryan looked at the generator. The light inside it flickered wildly. He ran to the control panel and saw that one of the wires had come loose. "It's unstable," he said. "We need to leave now." Thomas ignored him and grabbed the wooden box containing the crystal. "This is all I need," he said. "You can have the rest." "Put it back," Ryan warned. "You don't know what that thing can do." Before Thomas could answer, the ground shook again. The generator's light flashed bright and a loud hum filled the air. Ryan ran forward, trying to grab the box from Thomas, but the energy burst from the crystal in a flash of white light. The next thing Ryan knew, he was lying on the floor. The air smelled like burnt stone. The light was gone. Thomas was lying nearby, unconscious. The wooden box was broken and the small crystal rolled near Rian's hand. It was still glowing faintly, but weaker now. He slowly picked it up, breathing heavily. The chamber was quiet again. The tremor had stopped. Rian looked at Thomas, who was still breathing, then at the glowing crystal in his hand. He knew now that this was more than a treasure. It was a discovery that could change everything. He put the crystal safely in his pocket and started dragging Thomas toward the tunnel. The air was thick, but he kept going. He had made his choice. He would protect this legacy no matter what it cost. The morning sky was pale and silent after the storm of the night before. Thin mist covered the mountain and the trees stood still, dripping with rain. Inside Hillrest Lodge, Ryan sat near the window, watching the forest below. His hands were wrapped around a cup of warm tea and his eyes were tired but steady. Thomas was lying on the couch, still weak but awake. His arm was bandaged and a faint bruise marked his forehead. Ryan had carried him out of the underground chamber after the explosion. The strange machine below had stopped humming, and the tunnels were quiet again. Thomas spoke in a low voice. "You could have left me there." "Why didn't you?" Ryan looked at him. "Because my grandfather built that place to protect life, not destroy it. I don't want to turn into someone who forgets that." Thomas gave a dry smile. "You're a fool, Ryan. The world will come for it sooner or later. You can't hide a treasure like that forever." Ryan said nothing. He knew Thomas might be right, but he also knew that power was not always meant to be sold. He had seen what the crystal could do. It was more than gold or wealth. It was energy that could light cities and change the future if used wisely. For now he needed to keep it safe. He stood and went to the fireplace. The brass and silver keys were still lying on the table beside the glowing crystal. It pulsed softly like a living heart. Ryan wrapped it in a piece of thick cloth and placed it inside the metal box that had survived the explosion. Then he locked it with both keys. Thomas watched him quietly. "So what will you do now?" "I'll repair the lodge," Ryan said. "I'll keep this place alive. My grandfather wanted it that way. Maybe one day when the world is ready, I'll share what's down there." Thomas sighed and looked away. "You think you can guard something this big alone?" Ryan picked up his old backpack and set it near the door. "I won't be alone forever. But for now, this is my responsibility." For the next few days, Ryan worked hard. He fixed the broken windows, cleaned the dusty rooms, and repaired the old roof with wood he found nearby. Every night he lit the fireplace and read more of Eldon Marlowe's journal. The pages told him how the lodge had once been a research center, how travelers from faraway lands came to see the inventions, and how Eldon had dreamed of a world where energy came from nature, not from destruction. Ryan began to feel a sense of peace. He was no longer the broke hiker who had wandered without direction. He had a purpose now. One evening, as he stood outside the lodge watching the sunset over the hills, Thomas came to him. He looked healthier, though still tired. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Thomas said. "I've decided not to tell anyone about this place. You saved my life." "I owe you that much," Ryan nodded. "That's enough for me. But if you ever change your mind, remember that some secrets are worth keeping." Thomas looked toward the forest. "You're brave, Ryan, or maybe just lucky. Either way, I hope you know what you're guarding." Ryan smiled slightly. "I do." When Thomas left the next morning, Ryan watched him disappear down the trail. The lodge felt quieter again, but not empty. It felt alive. The sound of wind through the trees and birds in the distance filled the air with calm. Days turned into weeks. Ryan restored more of the lodge, turning it from an abandoned shell into a warm home. He repaired the staircase, cleaned the garden, and even built a small workshop near the back where he could study the remaining blueprints. One afternoon, while working in the workshop, he found something hidden inside one of the old shelves, a sealed envelope with his name written in faded ink. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a final letter from Eldon Marlowe. "To my heir, if you have found this, then my plan has succeeded. I knew the world would one day lose its balance and that only someone who understood the value of life, not greed, could carry my dream forward. The crystals below the lodge are pure and powerful. Use them only to help, never to control. The true wealth of Hillrest is not gold, but hope." Ryan closed his eyes as he read the last words. Hope. That was what he had been missing all his life. He folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the locked box. From that day, Ryan made it his goal to understand everything his grandfather had built. He studied the old machines, repaired what he could, and took notes. Sometimes he walked through the underground tunnels just to make sure they were still safe. The generator in the deep chamber still pulsed faintly, but stable. The energy inside seemed to respond only to him, as if it recognized the Marlowe name. Months passed. Travelers began to appear again on the mountain paths. Some stopped by the lodge, drawn by the smell of food or the sight of smoke rising from the chimney. Ryan welcomed them kindly, offering rest and warmth. They never knew the secrets beneath their feet. To them, Hillrest Lodge was a peaceful place hidden among the trees. To Ryan, it was the bridge between his past and his future. One evening, a young woman named Lena, a traveler who had lost her way, arrived at the lodge. She helped him cook and clean for a few days in return for shelter. She was curious but respectful, asking little about his life. Before she left, she said, "This place feels special, Ryan. It feels like it's alive." He smiled. Maybe it is. When she left, Ryan felt something new inside him, the feeling of connection. He was not meant to guard the lodge in silence forever. He would find people who believed in creation, not greed, and together they would carry Eldon Marlowe's vision forward. One morning, while checking the underground room, Ryan noticed that the energy from the generator had spread through the stone floor, forming glowing lines that reached toward the walls. It was as if the lodge itself was awakening. The air felt warmer and the crystals shone brighter than ever. He placed his hand on the metal column. The light pulsed softly, matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time, he understood what his grandfather had meant. The generator was more than a machine. It was connected to the land, to the energy of the earth itself. When he returned to the surface, the entire lodge seemed brighter. The wooden walls glowed softly under the sunlight. The sound of the forest blended with the wind, and Ryan felt peace deep inside his chest. That night, he sat by the fire and opened the journal again. On the last page, there were words he had not noticed before, written faintly at the bottom. "The one who chooses to protect rather than take will find the true treasure." Ryan looked around the room. The firelight danced across the walls and outside the window. The stars shone above the mountains. He realized the truth then. The real treasure was never the gold or the energy crystal. It was the purpose, the peace, and the hope that came with it. He smiled to himself and whispered, "I understand now." Years later, Hillrest Lodge would become famous again, not as a place of hidden gold, but as a home for travelers, inventors, and dreamers. People would come to learn, to share ideas, and to find inspiration. They would not know the full story, but they would feel the magic of the place. And at the heart of it all, Ryan Marlowe would remain. The man who once was a broke hiker, but became the guardian of a secret that could change the world. He had inherited more than an abandoned lodge. He had inherited a legacy,